Well, we are three past, so let's we're joining this month's AOT Learning Network webinar, Spirituality, Recovery, and SMI. My name is Brooke, and I work on tax implementation team. I'm joined on the screen here by my colleagues, Amy, Sarah, Shanti, and Jared. And today we're going to hear a presentation by Jared Wyma-Bradley, and the presentation will highlight the role of spirituality in recovery, um, explore how to support clients' spirituality, and provide a framework for understanding and supporting someone in AOT experiencing religious delusions. And so we're really grateful to learn about this important topic from tax very own Jared Wyma-Bradley. And Jared serves as Senior AOT Advisor on tax AOT implementation team. And prior to joining TAC, Jared served as an interfaith spiritual care provider in a public inpatient psychiatric hospital. Just a few quick to-dos before we dive in. Registration for this webinar was made available through the AOT Learning Network. If you were forwarded a notice for this event and are not a member of the Learning Network yet, we would definitely encourage you to join for more events like this one and also access to all things AOT. I'm going to put that registration link in the chat so you can join if you haven't already done so. And then lastly, I just want to remind everyone that you are camera and microphone off as webinar attendees, but you can submit questions throughout the presentation using the chat or the Q&A function. And we will have the opportunity to have a Q&A with Jared at the end. With that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Jared.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks everyone for being here, and to my TAC colleagues for helping with this presentation, making sure everything looks good and helping me with some of the content. To some of my former colleagues at the hospital, thanks for showing up today. Good. I know some of you said you were coming. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and get started? I know Brooke did a little introduction for me and my background. I'm the Senior AOT Advisor at TAC, and I work on our providing training and technical assistance for AOT programs. For those of you who don't know what AOT is, it's assisted outpatient treatment, which is a court-mandated treatment. So this presentation will be about spirituality recovery and severe mental illness. And like Brooke said, it'll go over spirituality as a component of recovery, as well as how to support your clients, participants, individuals through this, through their treatment and their spirituality, and how to support somebody who is experiencing religious delusions. I have here on our opening slide a quote from TAC's founder, Dr. Fuller Torrey. Like all human beings, persons with schizophrenia have a need to relate to a God or philosophical worldview, which allows them to place themselves and their lives within a larger context. So before we get going into this, I wanted to give just some definitions and a little background. I worked in the hospital on the inpatient side for 5 years, providing therapeutic groups, one-on-one counsel, and ensuring that individuals in the hospital had the ability to practice their faith, their spirituality, as they see fit. And so some people might call that a chaplain. So I'm going to give you some definitions. A chaplain is a type of minister. Chaplains are not necessarily ordained. Many of them are, but many of them aren't. I am not ordained. We provide spiritual and emotional support to people in a secular setting. So spiritual care providers are in places like hospitals, universities, correctional facilities, sometimes airports. So more like public spaces outside of religious institutions. And chaplains typically are interfaith, so providing support to people of all backgrounds. And some chaplains actually aren't even people of faith in the way that you might expect. They might be a humanist chaplain. Chaplains can come from all different spiritual backgrounds. And because chaplain is kind of a Christian coded word in its origin. Sometimes we prefer to go by spiritual care provider, spiritual care associate, pastoral counselor. There's a lot of different names. For clarity in this discussion, I want to explain what I mean when I say religion and what I mean when I say spirituality. I think about religion as the structured set of belief systems and practices, typically centered around a higher power or divinity, whereas spirituality is a broader concept. All religion is spiritual, but not all spirituality is religious. I think of it that way. Spirituality is a broader sense of connection with something greater, which may or may not involve religious practices. I think about spirituality as the thing that helps you answer the big questions in life. Who am I? Why am I here? And we'll talk more about that. Because we're going to talk about delusions, I just wanted to give a definition of that. Fixed beliefs that are not amenable to change in light of conflicting evidence. With all of these things, some definitions are obviously contested, and there's not a fully agreed upon definition for everything, but these will be our working definitions for our conversation today. So to get us started, I wanted us to think about how spirituality is a component of personhood, of a self, of your wellness. We often talk about providing holistic care, treating the whole person, right? And so to me, I think that including their spiritual health. That might sound kind of obvious, but I just wanted to reflect for a moment on the way that each of these things impacts one another. Obviously, if you are working in the mental health field, you see the way that when somebody is experiencing a mental illness, it affects their physical health, right? It may affect they may stop taking their medication for their physical ailments. Their diet may change, their exercise may change, it may be stressful. It may affect their social health as well, their occupational health, right? We see how these things all intersect with one another, and that includes spirituality. When somebody is in a hospital, or experiencing mental health crisis, they may be disconnected from their religious community, and that may impact their social health or their emotional health. Maybe they sing in the choir, and that was a source of both joy and community for them. Maybe they volunteered with their faith group, and that brought them a sense of meaning and purpose. Perhaps their spirituality was expressed in nature, and so the restrictions of their group home or their mental health facility has affected their environmental health in addition to their spiritual health. I just want us to think a little bit more inclusively about spirituality when we think about it. So it's not just attending a religious institution. So moving forward, I want us to take a look at what we mean when we talk about spirituality. Like I said before, I think about spirituality as the thing that helps us answer these big questions. Meaning, community, purpose, values, identity. Why is this happening? Where do I belong? Why am I here? What is good? What is right? What is just? Who am I? Right? These are the big parts of the bigger questions of life that I think spirituality helps us answer, or seeks to help us answer. And spirituality is a component of recovery. It's a part of what helps people. Not everybody, obviously, it's not important to every single person, but it is very typical. It's very common. And this is pulled from a really great resource if you want to learn more about this, called the Handbook of Religion and Health. There's a couple editions of it, but there's a newer one as well. In this, they review over 1,000 studies. And this review reveals that spirituality was associated with increased adaptation to bereavement, self-esteem, social support, life satisfaction, and happiness, hope and optimism, and purpose and meaning in conjunction with decreased levels of anxiety, loneliness, and suicide. Now, obviously, spiritual practices are not some sort of panacea. They're I just wanted to give space to that as well, that many people have been hurt by religion, by religious beliefs and practices, communities, religious leaders. And that is something for us as care providers, as people working with this population, that's something for us to be mindful of as well. For some people, it might be a really protective factor for them. It might be a huge component of their identity in their life. Of what keeps them going. And for others, it might be a complicated subject. And that's a part of, I think that's a part of integrating spirituality into our treatment, is recognizing the different type of relationship each person might have with it. So how is this relevant to people with SMI, with people experiencing severe mental illness? In one study of 115 outpatients with either schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, 71% indicated that religion instilled hope, purpose, and meaning in their lives. 54% said that it lessened psychotic or general symptoms. 28% said it increased their social integration. 33% said it decreased their risk of suicide. In another survey of 406 individuals with persistent mental illness at a Los Angeles County mental health facility, more than 80% of the patients indicated that they used religion to help them cope, and 30% indicated that religion was the most important factor that kept them going. So again, I know that some of these are like self-reports of its importance, but that's why it should be important to us. If it's important to the person in front of me, the person I'm caring for and serving, then it is important to me. If you learned that being involved in art or in dance or some form of sport or exercise was really important to the person that you were serving, I would think you would take a personal interest in that you would want to figure out how to keep them involved in that in a way that is good and healthy for them. So let's take a second and think about the clinical implications here. So we know it's important to the people we serve a lot of the time, but we're not always comfortable talking about it. And this is something I'd invite you to put in the chat if you feel comfortable. What are your fears and concerns about bringing up spirituality with the people you serve? What's your hesitation? What are you afraid of? What are you, if you are, not assuming everybody is, but the reason we're talking about this is because overall, health professionals, particularly mental health professionals, are less religious than their patients and often feel uncomfortable discussing topics of religion and spirituality. So part of this today is just sort of naming it, that this can be a tricky topic, that it can be uncomfortable, that we all have different relationships with religion and spirituality. And so how do we honor that? How do we kind of be upfront about that? But how do we still provide the best care that we can? So feel free to put something in the chat of what are your fears and concerns around talking about this topic with people. What really struck me in doing research on this was this list of bullet points here. Individuals who experience religious delusions are less likely to seek treatment, less likely to stay on treatment, less likely to receive support from religious communities. So not just mental health support, but also from religious communities, take longer to receive care, receive more medications, have poorer functioning, and are less satisfied with psychiatric treatment. So there's something here for us to think about is when somebody is experiencing a religious delusion, when their symptoms have some religious content to them, they might not receive as much support or the best support. And so this is another reason for us to be talking about this. So that's sort of the background on, I think, why this is important. It's relevant to the population that we serve a lot of the time. It has implications for people's treatment. We're not always comfortable talking about it. And so, how do we talk about it? How do we support people? So I want to turn to that part of the presentation. How do we offer support? So the first part, what we just talked about, is acknowledging and separating your own beliefs and biases, and that's some of what we have in the chat here. Some concerns around feeding delusions, fair. Another person said, "I love my faith, but fear consists of working for a state facility and the concept of separation of state and church." I know a lot of us have, in this field are intersecting with public entities. Talking about certain subjects, politics and religion, are taboo at work. Concern because my loved one's hallucinations and delusions skewed their religion. So these aren't necessarily like biases or these are your experiences, but starting by acknowledging that, right? Recognize here's where my anxiety is, right? Like if you name it, you have some control over it. You have something you can do about it. Also, I've worked with people in this field who have, on the one end of the spectrum, said, I believe that all religious belief is delusion. And I've worked with other people in this field who were on the verge of like proselytizing, like wanting to push a certain type of spirituality on patients, which obviously that's a huge no-no. I don't think either of those are perspectives necessarily helpful in serving the people that we work with. There's another text in the chat I just want to name here. I think navigating, supporting the individual's faith, but also increasing their engagement with professional mental health treatment, particularly if a delusion is that a higher power is all the treatment they need. Would love guidance on helping the person to stay true to their beliefs while also encouraging engagement with professional supports. So then that's a good thing for us to look at the next point here. One of my mantras as a spiritual care provider is be curious. Don't assume that we know everything about the person in front of us, even just because we know their faith, their spiritual background. You know, Southern Baptist from Texas is going to be a lot different potentially than an Episcopalian from Massachusetts, or somebody who is Russian Orthodox, or someone who is Lutheran. I mean, you name it. A Muslim from Malaysia is going to be different than a Muslim from North Africa. It's important for us to, one, come into this with humility and curiosity. You tell me about your faith. You tell me why this is important to you. You tell me how this serves you, how you like to engage in your faith and your spirituality, and just, kind of leave my presuppositions at the door, my agenda, my concerns, and let this person, let them guide me and tell me why this is important to them. For AOT programs, especially programs like this that are community-based and more like outpatient programs, having partners in the community, I think, is a great idea. Hopefully, the first time that a client comes to you, hopefully when a client comes to you to ask about how they could attend a prayer service at the local mosque, hopefully that's not the first time that you've reached out to the local mosque, the local Islamic Cultural Center. A lot of faith communities provide services in the community. Maybe they provide meals or support homeless communities. Maybe they have, a lot of Islamic cultural centers have social services built in, where they may have a social worker on staff that helps connect their community to social services. So starting to like build some of those relationships in your community means that this isn't something that you have to do alone, that you have people you can call when something presents itself. Also important is to be interdisciplinary. I'm sure many of you have met a chaplain or a spiritual care provider. Many of your programs are probably partnered with hospitals, and a lot of the hospitals may have a spiritual care provider. My assumption is that most chaplains most would love a call and would be glad to help, would be glad to offer resources or places for you to connect. Maybe somebody is needs some sort of a religious book or something to pray with, prayer beads of some sort, and you can help get this person what they're looking for. Additionally, I encourage you to engage their family and support system. We often talk about how it's important to get a good history for a person that we're serving. I think that includes a spiritual history. That includes understanding their relationship with faith, with religion. Is it something that fluctuates, that comes and goes with their symptoms? Did they used to be a part of a faith community and now they're not? Is there a newfound interest in this faith? Is there a family member that maybe got them into it? I think it's just if you have a connection with their family or their support system, utilize that to help get to know the person and their interests and values. And then most importantly, letting the participant lead. You don't need to be an expert on spirituality, on faith, on any of this necessarily. It's not about showing up as some sort of expert. It's about person-centered care, letting them tell you what they need. And I know I'm talking to you as somebody who worked in spiritual care, so I was sort of the expert in my context. But I have some great examples of people who were not chaplains, not spiritual care providers, who let the participant lead them and offered integrated spirituality into treatment in a really seamless way. I knew a peer recovery specialist who had a person they were working with who had a real sincere interest in like acts of devotion, practices of devotion from like monks, like a monastic community, like the Franciscans or the Dominicans. And so this peer recovery specialist connected him with a monastic community, and so that he could get a pen pal and they could write back and forth about their commitment to their faith. That expanded his community and gave him a healthy way to practice his faith. There was an occupational therapist who helped source a head covering for a woman who to wear in prayer. And she asked her, what kind of head covering do you need? What should it look like? What should it be made of? Like, you tell me what you need. This was a different faith than than the occupational therapist. I knew a music therapist who helped find worship and gospel music to put on an MP3 player for an individual. So he didn't necessarily know what musicians or artists to look for, and so he asked them, he asked me, he asked around, like, hey, who are some good artists, and help me help this person. And I knew a judge. I heard a story of a judge who assigned homework to a participant to encourage them to study their religious beliefs. So, hey, next time I see you, tell me more about this thing or tell me more about that. Just if this is of interest to you and it's valuable to you, then let's talk about it. Tell me more about it. Some questions that you might ask in, say, like a treatment planning meeting, or when you're just doing a check-in of some sort. I mean, to start, obviously, do you consider yourself spiritual or religious? Do we even know that about this person? Would you like to talk about your spiritual beliefs or concerns as we develop your treatment plan? Are there spiritual beliefs or practices that help you cope with stress or difficult times? So this is why I think it's important for us to talk about this stuff and ask about it, because a lot of people cite prayer or reading scriptures as one of their key coping mechanisms. And if we haven't even asked about it, and we don't even know about it, how are we going to point them back to that practice? We may not even be aware that it's important to them. Have you experienced any changes in your faith or beliefs since your illness began? This is where we can really, I think, really be therapeutic. This is another component of their life that may have been affected by their illness, and we might not be asking them about it. Maybe it's created a rift between them and their faith community, or maybe they had an experience that was sort of a religious experience when they were sick, and now they don't know how to sort those things out. Um, Maybe that's making them anxious, uncertain. Like we can support their feelings, we can join them in that and support them in that without having to be some sort of a theologian. Do you ever feel abandoned or punished by God? Now, that's a big question. Maybe you want to reserve that one for the chaplain. But think about it. If someone you were serving said, I'm feeling abandoned by my parents, that's something that I think therapeutically, if you're a therapist, a psychologist, a social worker, that you would know how to support somebody through that and how to ask them more about it, how to give them a space to express their feelings. You can do the same thing if they're feeling that way about their higher power. Are there any spiritual practices or resources that you would like to explore? So that kind of goes back to like helping them build out coping mechanisms and ways to explore their faith and tap more into it if you know it's something good for them. Is there anyone or any community that we can help connect you with or reconnect you with? Like I said, there may have been a falling out with a faith community. So that's a way that you could talk to them about, is there someone you already know that's attending this a congregation that you could go with, a family member, or is there is there a place that you've heard of that you would like to learn more about? I could pull up their website and their address, and you could call and talk to one of the faith leaders or a volunteer. We can explore this with somebody, and it's not pushing faith on anyone. It's letting them, if it's important to them, let them guide you down that path. Now, I want to turn to the rest of our presentation is going to be talking about supporting somebody who is experiencing religious delusions. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. There is a Q&A section though too. Now, religious delusions are fairly common. In those with schizophrenia, 25 to 39% of those experiencing psychosis have religious delusions. In patients with acute mania, bipolar disorder, 15 to 22% have religious delusions. I've read a few different studies, and the numbers are kind of, you can see 25 to 39%, kind of all over the place. But I think we can just say like around a third of people with this experience are experiencing religious delusions. It's not uncommon. All the more reason for us to be prepared to talk about it. So the way that it often presents, things you might recognize, hearing a voice from God or the devil, including auditory command hallucinations, so telling them to do something, visual hallucinations of religious symbols or figures, believing that they are the reincarnation of a religious figure like Jesus Christ, the Messiah, God, some other divine being, and maybe they've been given some special powers or special purpose, believing that they've committed an unforgivable sin and thus they are destined to eternal damnation, or obsessive compulsive repetition of prayers or detailed time-consuming rituals. So supporting somebody in this, there can be a temptation to want to assess and dismiss, like, oh, I've assessed this is it's a delusion, therefore I don't have to take it seriously. This isn't real, and so I don't want to entertain it. I don't want to join in it and make them think that I also think that they're Jesus Christ, or that I'm hearing the same voice. So I do want to give just some criteria for assessing, but I don't want that to be our first reaction. I want our first reaction to be join the person in the experience. You don't have to confirm it, you don't have to deny it, but you can join them in the experience of what it might feel like. But some criteria for assessing, um, instead of focusing on the content of the delusions, focus on the experiential impact of the delusion on the person's life. There's not, I don't think, a hard and fast way of being able to tell reality from unreality all the time. But some, are they 100% certain, unquestioning, kind of fanatical about it? Faith, I heard the opposite of faith isn't doubt, it's certainty. That most people of faith, they operate without 100% certainty. That's kind of why we say, like, take it on faith. So that's a kind of a little red flag for me if somebody is extremely certain about something. Are they really preoccupied with it? Is it frequent? Notice the frequency of the delusion in a person's thoughts. It's something they like can't really escape. They can't really control. Most people of faith have, control over their faith, over their spiritual practices. Is it all they think about and all they want to do? Is it causing them emotional distress and it's a negative impact on their life? Does it bring them discomfort? Does it bring them comfort? Pay attention to how it affects them and the degree, the influence on a person's actions. Are they taking actions because of it, changing things in their life, acting differently? Some things to pay attention to. Some further questions that you might ask when working with somebody who you think might be having religious delusions. Is their interest in this religion newfound and intense? So they grew up Catholic and they've always been Catholic and they've talked to you about that, and then suddenly they're very, very interested in a faith that they may not even really know much about or understand. Is it invasive? Does it negatively affect their relationships, their daily life, their work? How does it affect their mood? We talked about that. Are they fearful, anxious, shameful about it? Do they have an uncritical attitude about it, unable to discuss it and receive feedback? Does it not fit within, or is it incompatible with their religious tradition? That might require you to have some familiarity with the faith. But if it's pretty counter to everything else that the faith says, that can be just a hint at you of, kind of what might be going on. And really importantly, obviously, does it co-occur with other psychiatric symptoms? And that can be something that then you can track, that you can pay attention to as sort of a warning sign. And something too, that when the person is no longer symptomatic, you can have a conversation with them about it so that you can then be in good faith, have that conversation. Say, hey, like, remember when you were sick last month or last year, and like, remember how you got really interested in your faith and it became like much more of a priority for you. Do you think that might be part of your illness? And so that can be something that you can start that conversation, but you don't want the first time that you're talking about faith with somebody, you don't want the first time to be when they're currently having religious delusions. That's why I think having these conversations early and often, and it being something that you're comfortable talking about is really important. I don't think this is the time to present contradictory evidence or really do reality testing to start arguing with them. I think it's time to build rapport and help them manage what they're going through. Think about if somebody said that they thought their phone was stolen by a demon. I think a demon came into my room and stole my phone. Um, we get caught up on the word demon and the fact that this was a religious experience of some sort. If they had said, I think the CIA came in and stole my phone, you might also be hinted to the like, oh, that's probably unlikely, and I know this person has a history of like concerns about the CIA. You might be able to support them in that and be like, well, it sounds like that's an intrusion of your privacy. Like that's probably kind of frightening. Let's figure out how to like first right now, like make you feel safe. It has nothing to do with whether or not there is a demon or isn't a demon, but like you know how to comfort somebody who feels unsafe. And that's really what the rest of this presentation is about, is joining somebody in their experience without necessarily confirming or denying it. There's a great article called Chaplain, Can You Do an Exorcism? This is written by a chaplain who works in a psychiatric facility. And I always read that. This is like one of my favorite pieces on this topic. And I just want to read this quote for you. A request for exorcism need not be met specifically with exorcism. The patient is suffering from frightening experiences that they need to talk about. They need someone to guide them on the journey they're on, to help them make theological and philosophical sense of the world as they experience it. A patient who asks for exorcism is asking for help. It's the job of every member of the interdisciplinary team, psychiatrist, therapist, nurse, chaplain, to provide that help within the scope of service each professional provides, and in collaboration with the rest of the interdisciplinary team. So I want you to take a second and think about what it must feel like to feel like you need an exorcism, to feel possessed by a demon, a spirit, an otherworldly force, probably malevolent. Think how frightening that must be, how terrifying that must be. Hold on to that, and I want you to think about what feelings you might have. And in a second, I'll ask you to put those in the chat. But this is sort of our approach. As first is humanize and destigmatize. Focus on the person, not the delusion. I don't want to get caught up on my own beliefs about spirits and demons and things. Whether you believe that or not isn't relevant to this moment. This person in front of you is experiencing this thing, and it's probably frightening. Join that person. Empathy, engage with them non-judgmentally, respecting their beliefs without reinforcing delusions. Avoid confrontation, avoid dismissing or challenging the delusion directly while gently guiding toward therapeutic treatment. So somebody in the chat had mentioned that, like, how do I continue to guide them towards that, towards treatment, towards the things that I think will help them, while not dismissing them. I operate from the theory that you have to treat somebody's defenses first, like help somebody get their defenses down of like, all right, let's first like get you safe. Let's take care of this like crisis moment right now. And then we'll talk about like what helps. I have this picture here of two people in a boat because someone gave this analogy to me and to describe what it means to join somebody. They're in the boat and you can push them out to sea and just leave them, just abandon them, just push them out to sea. You can get in the boat and watch them row, just watch them do all the work, or you can get in the boat and row with them, be in those turbulent waters with them, row them back towards the shore, work together. And so that's the kind of image I want us to think about is we are joining this person, we're getting in the boat and we're rowing with them. So someone says, I am possessed by a demon. Acknowledge what they said. You feel possessed by something. That's not confirming it's true or not, but you are acknowledging their experience and you're voicing that. Now, this is where I want you to think about those feelings. Imagine how they might feel. I imagine that must be frightening. If somebody feels possessed by a demon, I want you to put in the chats, what are what are some feelings that come to mind? What might someone be feeling if they think that they are possessed by a spirit, by a demon? What emotions? Um, how does this change their world right now? A lot of fear, scared, vulnerable. Yeah, that's a good one. Like something has gotten inside of me and I can't do anything about it. Lonely. Talk about a lonely experience. People probably have looked at you sideways. They don't take you seriously. They kind of just people walk away. They don't know what to do about it. So threatened, you're definitely under threat. Powerless, definitely powerless. That allowed this to happen, right? Is this somehow my fault? If I hadn't sinned in this way or done this thing, this wouldn't have happened. Um, Powerless is a big one I want to think about. And think about too the setting that they're in. Maybe they're already in AOT, a court mandated program where they might feel powerless. Tapping into that feeling already. Maybe they're in the hospital involuntarily. You already feel powerless there. So it's sort of like in its own way. So the reason I want us to focus on the feelings is because someone said hopeless, that too, is because you as as caregivers, as practitioners, as people working in this space, you know how to support somebody who's afraid. And so here, explore those feelings and methods of coping. What have you done in the past when you feel this way that helps you feel less scared? You know how to support somebody who's scared. You know how to help find them a place where they feel comfortable, a place that feels safe. Maybe you move to a different room. You sit down. You get them a stress ball. You get them something that you know will help that fight or flight reaction just kind of subdue a little. You know how to support somebody who feels lonely, be with them. Talk about if there's anyone they can reach out to when they're feeling this way. We often get so caught up on the details of a delusion, of the religiosity aspect to it, that we like forget our skills as care providers in this space. And you know what to do. And so part of this is just realizing that you know how to comfort somebody. And then you can start going into the assessment side of things and figuring out like what other interventions we might need. Again, this isn't necessarily the moment to jump in with challenging arguing with them about whether it's true or not. You want to join them in the experience. So I wanted to give us a few scenarios to kind of wrap up here. So the first scenario is a participant says, I am Jesus Christ. So what are some non-judgmental, non-stigmatizing responses? Someone introduces themselves to you as Jesus Christ. What are some things that you can say back? Nice to meet you. Great. Easy. How long have you felt like this? Tell me more. Yeah, tell me more, please. That must feel good. Thank you for sharing. Simple. Thank you for sharing. We're not making a value statement on it, whether it's like good or bad. It is. Nice to meet you. Yeah. I'm Jared, you know. Um, Tell me more. What does this mean to you? Yeah, what does this mean to you? I am Jesus Christ could mean a lot of different things. What role does that play in your life? What do you do, Jesus? If somebody says, I am Jesus, it could mean a lot of things. It might mean they feel it's their duty to serve others. It might mean it's their duty to save people, that there's some impending doom coming. So there could be kind of an anxiety around it of like, I have to do this special thing. Um, it could be a statement of power and importance. I'm important, nobody else says that I matter. Nobody else I'm powerless in all these other ways. But no, I'm Jesus Christ, or I'm Gabriel, or I'm, all these different characters and people that they could be. So I think a curiosity around this, what does that mean to you, is great. Are you happy about that? Yeah. Maybe they're not. I didn't ask for this, right? This is not a duty or a task that I wanted. But it's been thrust upon me. Yeah. Now let's take a look at another scenario. A participant shares that they feel that they are being punished by both God and the court system. What do you think are some things that you could say to this person? Or why might they be saying that? That must be so hard. That's scary. And this isn't necessarily like a delusion of any sort, right? This is just an experience, a feeling, a belief that I feel like I'm being punished. How are you coping with that feeling? It can feel constraining to have these responsibilities hanging over you. What happened to make you feel that way? Yeah, I'm sitting there thinking like, what did I do to deserve this? I'm being punished, right? Like did I do something to deserve this? Can you give me an example? Yeah, like what does that look like? I want to be here for you. How can I best support you through this? What's the specific punishment? Yeah. How is God punishing you? Um, you know, I pray and I don't hear anything, or I used to feel this way and now I don't. Um, you can start to investigate it a little with the person and help them understand it. And two, if this is an AOT program, you also probably you want to support them with the emotional experience of this, but you also want them to understand that AOT isn't intended to be a punishment, right? That this is meant to be a place to get you care and get you treatment and help you live your life to the best of your ability. But you also want to recognize that it's court mandated and it can feel really out of your controls. What's the specific punishment? I want to be here for you. This sounds frustrating. Mhm. It feels that way when you have to see the judge, but we are on your side. Yeah, maybe there was something that just happened. Maybe they just had a tough conversation with the judge or a court official. Is there any upside you can see to being in a program like this? Others have felt like you do. They're not alone, right? Let you know you're not alone. Other people have felt this way too. I have one other scenario. How do you overcome wellness check-ins when the delusion person feels it's more CIA, more punishment? Mm, yeah. Yeah, so maybe they think that you're a part of the broader system that's punishing them. For me, when I was in the hospital, a lot of people would have an experience like that. They thought that the hospital was an extension of the CIA and it was there to punish them. And so much of it for me was like was building that rapport and being consistent and not being personally offended by an accusation or anything, making sure I'm consistent. I'm getting them what they ask for when they ask for it. All right, you think I'm from the CAA? Whatever. I'm still going to get you the thing that you asked for. I'm still going to continue to like show up and be there for you. Now, my role was a little different because I wasn't in charge of their like discharge plan or something. But I think being consistent, being empathetic and kind, and taking those feelings really seriously is a part of it. Let's look at this last scenario. I don't want us to get run out of time. I want to leave a little bit of time at the end for a question or two. Simply, a participant is often hyperreligious when symptomatic, but is currently not having any symptoms. They share that they have been reading their Bible and praying more, and that they miss going to church. So how do you support this person? What could you ask them about this? What might be a direction that you could take this? Would you like support in getting reconnected? Yeah. What's or like, yeah, do you feel safe going back to church? What do you miss about it? Why did you leave? Is there a church you feel safe at, or do you have a person to go with? Going to a new place is really hard for a lot of people, I think. So yeah, if you can go with somebody, it's great to have a buddy. Um, and the reason I asked this question too is because it's one of those where you might start to go like, oh, because this person is showing more interest, is this a sign that their symptoms are returning? And not necessarily, right? This could be somebody who's really just really finding meaning in this practice, and you want to pay attention to that. I want to just turn to this conclusion and then give you all some time to ask a question or two. So just kind of a reminder of what we talked about. Religion and spirituality is important to many people. It's a component of recovery for many people. We want to let the people we serve, we want them to guide us in incorporating religion and spirituality. And we want to be curious and non-judgmental, empathic, and respectful. I want to turn to some questions. I know there was a couple, maybe a couple in the chat. I just want to respond to some of, see what was written here in the chat. I find that clients can be hyper-religious when manic or in psychosis, but they have an authentic faith outside of being symptomatic, and we can support them in that. Absolutely. It's another one of those kind of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like just because they're hyper-religious when they're symptomatic doesn't mean that their faith is not legitimate or important to them. Also allowing them to know that, and I'm reading from Lisa, she said, also allowing them to know that, and by encouraging them, saying that new members have come aboard, that there's some old members that are no longer there, and that they are welcoming new, less judgmental people to the church. Yeah. I want to take a look at the Q&A. How is spirituality used on someone with anosognosia, lack of insight? How is spirituality used on someone with anosognosia, lack of insight? I don't, if you can, Patty, if you can explain that question a little bit more in the chat, I'd love some clarification. Because somebody has lack of insight into their illness, it is true that it may be more difficult to engage them in a way you're not expecting them to come to some revelation that, oh, like that belief that I had then was a symptom of my psychosis. For me, it's still about building that relationship. I should take this person seriously. I should be concerned about what concerns them. Obviously, if it's something that's leading them to make decisions that aren't good for them, Well, then that's something we address in any situation. I've had participants who or patients who um, would stop eating because like God was telling them to, right? Something like that. And I don't have to like tell them that that's not God necessarily, right? I don't have to like argue with them about that. But we can have a conversation about how is this affecting your life right now? That we can have balance, that you can still practice your faith with sincerity and the intensity that you want to, but like God also, I imagine, would want you to be well. And I think having a good rapport and relationship with the person is the foundation to being able to have some of those difficult conversations. I'm looking at the any other questions? I'm looking at some of the chat here.
I see a question in the chat that I could bounce to you, Jared, while you look
Go for
through.
it. Thanks.
Doris asked if you, well, the question was, what about with communities that talk against mental illness or refer to mental illness as demonic? So it's not necessarily only the participant, it's also the context that they're coming into care with.
Right. Right. I mean, that's a very fair question, and which is why building your community partnerships is important. You don't want to refer somebody to a congregation who is not going to support this person's mental illness. This is where you get to show up as the expert on mental health care. You don't have to be the expert on their faith tradition, but you can be the expert on the mental health care and say, I understand this illness and how it presents and what helps people survive it. And so it's my duty to support them in that. Having advocates, if you can find a connection to that community, somebody who kind of lives in both worlds, lives in your world and understands how mental illness presents, but also has buy-in in those communities. That's also really important. That could be somebody who could help do that translating work with you and be taken seriously and on good faith. We're getting to our hour time here, but there's another question here. What do you do if religious talk shows signs of possibly being so bizarre it could harm others or themselves? How do you know the difference? That for me is no different. If you remove religious talk from that question, what if you do if someone's showing signs of harming themselves or others? You respond in the very same in the way that in the same way, right? Like if it means an emergency evaluation is needed, if it means a pickup order is needed, right? If it means someone needs emergency care because they are harmed, you have to do that assessment. Is it imminent? Are they serious? Do they have the means? All of those things. Just because it's religious, I don't think means we take it any less or more any less serious. Like there are plenty of stories of people who have hurt themselves or hurt somebody else because of some sort of a religious experience or a misreading, I will say, of a scripture, and we want to be able to intervene to prevent that, and that's not preventing somebody from practicing their faith. That is protecting somebody's well-being. I think we're getting close to our wrap-up time here. Is there any last question? I can talk about this. I can answer for you all.
Jared, this is Brooke. I think I don't remember if you already addressed this one, but I think I saw one about what what about if a client or a patient um is adopting a religion that's in contrast to the one in which they were raised. And the example is Islam versus Judaism.
So, um, it's not my place or any of our place to stop somebody from pursuing a pursuing a religious expression, right? That's a delicate conversation that, again, I think you want to have good rapport with this person and a good understanding. Hold on, I'm going to answer this question, but I do want to these are some of the resources, references here, if anybody wants to jot some of these down. You want to have a good relationship with this person so that you know that they know that you're coming to them not to stop them from going down another path, another faith tradition, but that you're genuinely concerned about their well-being. For some folks, that's going to be a huge rift in their family, in their community. And so you want to be able to talk to them about that. How does your mom feel about that? Your sister? How does your partner feel about that? To explore that with them. What draws you to that faith? Why are you interested in it? You have no agenda in this. If it's in contrast with the faith that they were raised in, it could be great. It could be liberating for them to go to a new faith. Or it could cause some rifts in their community. And you hold their hand through it and be with them through that process. Any slides will be shared. The presentation is recorded. I know some folks have to take off. I just want to thank you all for being here, for supporting this, for engaging in the conversation so excitedly and enthusiastically, for my colleagues for helping prepare this. Really, I love talking about this stuff. So thank you for engaging in this topic with me.